Good evening. On behalf of KPCC and Southern California Public Radio, welcome to the Crawford Family Forum for tonight's program, Real Talk for Real Teachers. And now, your host for this evening, KPCC's reporter covering education with a focus on arts education, Mary Plummer.
Good evening. Thank you everyone so much for being here. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our guest, Rafe Esquith, tonight. Rafe is a teacher at Hobart Boulevard Elementary School in LA's Koreatown. He teaches the 5th grade there from room 56, where he runs a longtime Shakespeare program for students. As Janice mentioned, some of you may know Rafe from his New York Times bestseller, Teach Like Your Hair's on Fire. Rafe has been awarded the President's National Medal of the Arts, as well as Oprah Winfrey's Use Your Life Award. He's spoken extensively around the country, as well as in China, where he spent time this summer. Rafe's latest book, which we'll be talking about tonight, is called Real Talk for Real Teachers, and I'm thrilled to have Rafe here tonight at KPCC to talk about it. Well, welcome, Rafe.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Rafe, I'd like to start tonight with a little audio from your classroom, if you don't mind.
Sure.
I was lucky enough to visit Rafe's classroom last spring during a production of The Tempest, and I got to ask the kids what they learned from the program. So we'll start out with a little audio. And just a production note, the music you'll hear in the background of this clip is from the kids' production. So let's take a listen.
Every day is getting closer, going faster than a roller coaster.
You know, it's really hard to do this Shakespeare play.
At first, I thought I can't do it.
I had to work a lot, and Rafe taught us how to speak it well. Where should this music be? In the air or the earth? It sounds no more, and cheer waits upon some god of the island, sitting on a bank, weeping again the queen my mother's wreck.
I learned how to cooperate with people,
Work hard.
finish what I started.
Being in a play kind of helped me with my speaking ability.
I never knew how to dance like that, but now I know.
I love that. The kids are great.
Thank you.
If you could just start out by telling us a little bit about the teaching methods you've used in your program and why Shakespeare, if you could fill us in.
Why Shakespeare? Well, I like Shakespeare. I'm not asking all teachers to do Shakespeare, but I think what I try and encourage teachers to do is to bring their own passions into the classroom. These days, good teachers are becoming an endangered species, and they're leaving the profession because the system is crushing them. There are so many rules and regulations that are being thrown at teachers that they stop being themselves. I do Shakespeare because I love him, but the things that I teach with him, language and cooperation and discipline, I think you can do that with a gardening club or a soccer team, and that's what I really hope teachers remember to do, bring themselves to the classroom. Shakespeare's my guy. My father read him to me when I was 3 years old, so I know a lot about him. I explain him well, but it shouldn't be for everybody. But the goals of the program, and this is the key to it all, Mary, I don't really care about the test at the end of the year. I'm sorry. The real assessment of a teacher is what skills am I giving the children that they'll be using 10 years from now, 20 years from now. You show me a child who understands language well, who reads well and speaks well, and can work well with others, that kid's going to have a great life. That's why Shakespeare.
And I know that you're just back in the classroom. This year, just started a couple weeks ago. You're back in the classroom this year. This is your 31st year in the classroom.
Yep, 31st.
That's great.
Got according to the book, I have 470 more to go. So my wife, Barbara, needs a new kitchen, and we figured out that if I can teach for 470 more years, we can afford it. So 470 to go.
And in the book, Real Talk for Real Teachers, you talk about the benefits of a long career in teaching. Can you kind of fill us in on your thoughts on that?
Well, sure. Anybody who's a real teacher knows that your first couple of years, you're terrible. And I hear a lot of teachers laughing here when I see the heads going up and down. When I see my students from 30 years ago, my first words are always, I'm so sorry. I really want, and they say, nah, Rafe, you were fine. And I wasn't fine. I made a million mistakes. And the beauty of a long career is you can learn from your mistakes and you meet amazing teachers. Most of my good ideas came from watching great teachers, working with great teachers. But there's also one more important benefit to a long career. The first rule of teaching is we have to be the people that we want the children to be. We're asking kids to commit to education. But when they see their teachers leaving all the time, why would they commit? The reason the kids in room 56 are so fanatically devoted to that room is not that I'm so wonderful, I'm not that wonderful, but they know that I am dedicated to that room. They know I'm not leaving, and that's why they stay put and work so hard, because they're watching me. That's the benefit to the long career.
And can you talk a little bit about how has your teaching style changed from your early days in the classroom?
Well, I'm a lot more patient. I started to understand that, the pacing plan may say that all the children are going to learn how to multiply on April 11th. And then you realize that children are not little robots. They're not little learning units. I have 34 kids in my classroom. Some of them can barely count to 10, and other kids are ready to do algebra. And when I started to understand that and became more patient and calmer, and understanding that if a child doesn't multiply well today, there's tomorrow, there's the following week. When I slowed down, I became a far better teacher. And in this society where we keep speeding up, we want instant coffee and instant everything, we want our computers to be faster, I think slowing down is actually better for the students.
You write that teaching is a tough job to do for a long time, and it's also the type of job that's not possible to master in a few years. Could you tell us why those first few years are so tough, in your opinion?
Well, because I think most young teachers have a misconception of what they're getting into. They have their lesson plans, and they've gone to all their training sessions. And, there's a bitter joke going around now, Mary. And the joke is those who can teach and those who can't make the rules for teachers. and what happens, and I have 1,000 visitors a year to my room, and many of them are young teachers. And they're good, Mary. They've got the chops, and they really want to make a difference. But they've watched the Hollywood movies, and they go in and they think, hey, I'm really cool, and if I work really hard for a year, all of my kids are going to go to Harvard and Princeton. And when they see that that doesn't happen, when they see that they have to deal with poverty, and excuse my language, sometimes some real crazy-ass parents, and a system that is often dysfunctional, and they start to, in their minds, fail. They're not failing, but they think they're failing. They give up and they become discouraged and bitter. So the one thing about your early years, I'm trying with Real Talk to tell teachers this is an incredibly hard job. It is worth doing. This is my 31st year. I'm not going anywhere. But when you have those awful days, and we all have them, you've got to temper with the reality of what we're dealing with. That will steel your resolve better than watching a Hollywood movie where the teacher saves everybody. Because I'm really good at what I do, and I fail all the time, and this book is filled with my failures and terrible days and sleepless nights. I think that actually helps teachers more than somebody saying, ain't I wonderful?
You write in the book, when things go wrong, stay calm. And I was just wondering if you could, talk about, maybe share some stories about, how you came to that philosophy and how that popped up for you.
Well, first of all, again, I want my students to be calm. I don't want them to fly off the handle. I don't want them to throw tantrums. That means the teacher can't throw a tantrum. There is a very funny, you talk about a funny story. I had a parent last year, and it was great. It's just what teachers go through. We have a Shakespeare program, and I make it very clear to the parents that we have Saturday performances, and the parents know about this for a year. And we had a parent, very nice little girl, but the child was going through First Communion, and the parent came and said, look, she can't come to these performances. She can go to these shows, but not these shows. And I said, well, you've known for a year, you're in or you're not in. I completely support First Communion, it's great, but she can't be in the show. And the parent in front of my class went into this incredible profanity-laced tirade for like 15 minutes. And there was something wonderfully ironic about a parent cussing me out because her child had to go to First Communion. But this is the kind of thing that you deal with. And the kids were amazed that I was incredibly nice to her. I'm really sorry you feel that way, but I really can't talk about it now. We have a rehearsal to run. And why am I nice? Because I want my kids to be nice. I want my students to understand that when someone loses their cool or is screaming at me, it's a statement about them. It's not a statement about me. I can't control another person's behavior, but I can always be that calm person. And that's why my class is calm. We had a wonderful moment of how this can really benefit your students. But last year, right in the middle of the tempest, our whole sound system went out. And it's a complex sound system. And the audience was amazed because 3 or 4 kids just walked out on stage, no adults, went through the wiring, fixed everything, didn't blink an eye, and the show went on. And after the show, a lot of the parents said, that was better than the Shakespeare. Watching kids who are problem solvers, who stay calm because it's just a sound system. So I think it's, under the heading of don't sweat the small stuff. As a young teacher, you always sweat the small stuff, but with experience, you see that bigger picture of what your kids can be, and getting angry and yelling at them doesn't help get there. That's why I stay calm. Are there days when I want to throw the kids out the window? Of course there are. Are there days when kids behave in such maddening ways, you just want to scream at them and go, what the heck are you thinking? But I've learned it's not good teaching, and that's why I stay calm.
And talking about kind of the first few years of a teacher's career, can you talk a little bit about, advice for how teachers can get through those first few years and how we can think about retaining teachers for long careers?
Well, the first advice I give to the young teachers, watch others. And, we always tell children, hang out with the right kids. Young teachers have to hang out with the right teachers. I'm a lucky teacher. People know who I am. That's great. But there are hundreds of thousands of teachers who do the same work I do every day. They are the real heroes. And no one seeks their advice. They don't get to run professional development meetings, although they should be, because they have a lot of experience. I tell young teachers, anytime you have time off, watch other teachers. There's not enough of that. Most professional development is going to a room and people talk at you, or the publishing company says, this is the way you're supposed to use our book. It's better if you observe real teachers in action. That's the first thing. And the second piece of advice I give to them, and I have a whole chapter in the book called Keeping It Real. And this is something that I really hope the teachers listening and in this audience will think about. If you go to most children in school and ask, they're doing math or they're writing an essay, and you say, why are you doing this? What do you think most kids will say to that? They'll say, because my teacher told me to, or it's assigned, or it's due, or my mother will kill me if I don't get this done, or something like that. The reason my students are so committed to their work is I teach them a different answer. If you ask a Hobart Shakespearean, why are you doing your math? Why are you in Shakespeare? Why are you playing baseball? The child will look up and say, if I learn this skill, my life just got better. And every skill that I teach, I connect the skill with their life. We are not doing this for your grade. We are not doing this for a test. We're sure not doing it to please your teacher. You're going to be using the skill in your life. Just the mathematics we did today. We showed how in real life you're going to be using that math. When we play baseball, as we do every day because baseball is something of a religion in my classroom, I will teach the kids, why are we doing this? Well, first of all, we're working on focus because you can't hit and catch a baseball without focus. In real life, I will ask them, when do you have to focus? And they say, well, you got to focus to drive a car. If you choose to cut hair, you have to concentrate. If you choose to be a surgeon, you have to concentrate. So we're really not just playing baseball here. We're working on actual skills that we'll be using with our life. And I'll say to them, well, tell me another skill you're learning in a baseball game. And the kids will say, well, you have to play on a team. You cannot win a baseball game by yourself. When in real life, I will ask them, do you have to be on a team? And they will give me hundreds of examples of how a business person must work with others. So the advice I give to teachers, make your classroom relevant. No child is going to work hard because you write a standard on the board. No child is, they're not. Okay, I'm a real teacher. I know the teachers here agree with me, okay? No child is going to work hard because of the color theme of your classroom. It's not going to happen. When the education is made about them and they are working for themselves, that's when they buy in and work hard. It's harder to do that. It would be easier for me. I'm almost 6 feet tall. I can get a 10-year-old to do what I want him to do. I can say, look, kid, do your work or I'm going to beat your brains out. Or I'm going to, fail you and stand you in a corner and humiliate you. And he'll do it, but he won't learn anything. When my students see the relevance of their lessons, that's when they start working hard. That's the key advice that I would give teachers at any stage of their career. Relevance, relevance, relevance.
And going back to teachers who may leave the career earlier than you would hope, do you think that's a real problem for the education system? Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on teachers leaving the field?
It's a very real problem, and because I'm a real teacher, let's get real about something. There are people who shouldn't be teaching. Every good teacher knows there are bad teachers in the system, and they are bad for all of us. They're bad for the students, they're bad for their fellow teachers, they're bad for the administration. What bothers me is there are great teachers leaving because they just can't take it anymore. If anybody here knows, for example, what the Common Core is, if you have seen the evaluation, and all teachers want to be evaluated, nobody has a problem being evaluated.
We should explain, can you
Common
explain a bit what Common
Core is
Core
a new
is?
set of standards. They say it's new, it's not that new. But it's basically the newest Orwellian, Stalin-esque 5-year plan where people have put together this enormous set of standards and language, and teachers not only have to teach the same lessons we've always taught. 3 times 5 is still 15. You still have to put a period at the end of the sentence. But now you have to write it up in such a way that it matches language that people who don't teach are asking us to do. Then you have to go online, and in your evaluation of yourself, you have to use all this language they are force-feeding us to prove that you are a good teacher. That's why good teachers that I know have said, enough. I didn't sign up for this. At some point, you have a breaking point. I'm a lucky teacher. I have patrons, and I have a lot of friends, and I work with some amazing people at Hobart School, and they support me. But a lot of teachers are very isolated. And, they've got 3 kids at home, and they have to leave school at 3 o'clock because they've got little ones at home. It's too much pressure on them. And let's be clear about this. All teachers want to be evaluated. All teachers believe in high standards. There's no problem with that. But when we are force-fed from the top, something that is not going to help Johnny Reed any better, I promise you, Mary, you're going to have me back here in 5 years saying, was the Common Core successful? They'll tell you it was. They'll have statistics that prove that everybody's doing better. But people on the front lines will know that's not the case.
Rafe, so you've been on quite a book tour this summer. I know you've been traveling a lot. One stop was right here with KPCC's Larry Mantle and on Air Talk. And in that conversation, you said, I wrote this book to try to pick up our spirits. And that kind of stuck with me. And I thought it was interesting to think about this idea of inspiration and teachers, needing and benefiting from inspiration in the classroom. If you could share your thoughts on why that's so needed in our education system.
I think a lot of teachers have bought into a foundation that is not so. When you start to believe that you make a difference because the child has 95 at the end of the year when he used to have 85, that's good. Of course I want my students to improve. I want teachers to know that every day they walk into a classroom and they're a positive role model and they teach with passion and they enjoy their students, you are making a difference. And I respectfully disagree with teachers when they have those days where they think, I'm not making a difference. You don't know that, because I've seen in my own career, I've gotten letters from kids from 30 years ago who barely said hello to me, how I didn't think we had any connection at all. And they write me these letters that their lives are going well and they remember what they did in room 56 and they're still using those lessons. And I wrote this book to remind teachers you are making a difference. Every day you walk in there. It's just that in the Hollywood movie, at the end, the kids come to you and they tear up and they hold hands with you and they sing Kumbaya and they give you a mug that says, I love my teacher. It doesn't happen. It happens some of the time, but not usually. Most children have their own problems. They don't have time to appreciate our efforts. And I wrote this book to prove to the teachers, this is a thankless job. And to prove it to you, I'm going to tell you a funny thing that happened. No teacher gets thanked more than I do. I'm honored by heads of state. But over 20 years ago, I was the National Teacher of the Year with Disney. And I got called to give a speech in another state. And I thought, wow, people want to hear me say something? And they even gave me a plane ticket. I thought, wow, and $200, which I thought I was rich. It was fantastic. So they flew me to the city, and I was all excited. And here I am, the National Teacher of the Year. And they took me to this beautiful home. And I walked into the home, and I was like, wow, I'm staying here tonight? And I walked through the home, and I kept walking and walking out the back door into a garage where they put me on a 4-foot cot under a ping pong table with fresh cobwebs hanging in my face the night before my speech. And I thought to myself, I'm the National Teacher of the Year. I wonder what the guy who finished second is doing tonight. But I thought, well, it's got to get better. It's got to get better. Well, just last year, I was invited to give a speech in another state. I got picked up at the airport. It was a very dark summer night. I got picked up by a pickup truck, and I was sitting in Burger King wrappers covered in mustard and ketchup. I'm not a high-maintenance guy. I'm not. They drove me to this dark street, and as I got out, I was looking for a Best Western, something, a Holiday Inn. I can't see anything, and before I could even ask the guy, where am I, he drove off. I went down this dark path, found a building, got into the building, saw a guard sleeping at a desk next to an old woman in a wheelchair, and I said, sir, is this a hotel? And the guy woke up and he said, oh, you're the teacher. I said, yeah, I'm speaking here. He said, no, this isn't a hotel, it's a retirement home. And I said, this is a retirement home? And he said, it's a retirement home. And I said, a retirement home? And he said, but it's a really nice retirement home. And I got into this little tiny room with a little cot, but no cobwebs. So I thought that was progress. I wanted all teachers to understand no one understands the value of what we do. The politicians say they do, they don't. I wrote this book because I think we have to support each other. We know our value, and if we stick together, we can have better days. One of the chapters in this book called All for One and One for All, people who read about me think I'm this miracle worker. I'm not. I have a team of people around me who are amazing at what they do. I have a choreographer and a lighting designer and people that score music for me and former students and patrons. I could never do this alone. And it's fun to work with these great people, and it's great for my students to watch me work with other people because I want them to work with others as well.
I'd like to talk a little bit about failure, which you do talk about a lot in the book. And you've obviously had an incredible career teaching and are extremely successful, but you write that you still fail every day. And I was wondering
all
if you
the
could,
time.
Can you share some of that with us? I think for teachers beginning in their careers, it's hard to imagine maybe getting to where you are and how you got through all of that.
You have to have almost an amnesia. Because what happens is when you fail or you've worked really hard with a student, and I'm talking about heartbreaking failure, where terrible things happen, you can't let that pain into your classroom the following year, the following day. Those children don't need your pain. They've got their own problems. It took me a long time to understand that. I actually take a couple minutes in my car every morning in that dark parking lot. No matter what's happening, a couple years ago, one of my daughters was going through a difficult pregnancy. We were very worried about her, but I couldn't bring that into a classroom. The kids didn't need that. And just to give you an example, the ultimate failure that happened to me just a couple of years ago was every summer I take students to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. It's a wonderful place to take kids. We go there for 11 days, 30 or 40 kids, no chaperones, just my wife and me, because the kids are so amazingly behaved. There's never a problem. The town adores them. But one year, after driving 700 miles with their luggage, the kids get to fly, but I bring their luggage up. When I drove the luggage home, and it really worked hard, I got a phone call from the hotel that 3 of my students had stolen something.
Wow.
I can't even tell you. I didn't sleep for months. One of these kids that stole, I had personally gotten a $100,000 scholarship to for a private school.
Wow.
When I met with their family, the family cussed me out and said, Rafe, don't be so serious. Everybody steals. And I thought, no, they don't. But as I lay there night after night, furious with myself, why had I spent this extra time on these particular kids when perhaps there were other kids more deserving? That's the kind of failure that can cripple you. But what I did was I figured out what I did wrong, and rather than say, I'm never going to Ashland again, I bring the kids there every summer, and I'm better at it now. And we've never had that problem. This last summer of travel, best summer we've ever had, ever. The kids who are on those trips just glow with the memory of those trips. So what I try and tell young teachers is, of course, when you fail, feel miserable, cry, honestly talk to your peers about it, but get better. We tell our kids to learn from their mistakes. We've got to set the example. I can't give up because I tell the kids they can't give up. That's how I deal with failure.
And you stress that it takes time to develop this. You talk about that quite a bit in the book, that it's this practice as a teacher that helps you to get better.
Well, I'm the guy who wrote the first book, There Are No Shortcuts. And when I ask some teachers, what does that mean? They'll tell you, well, it means the kids have to work harder. The kids have to work with discipline. But it also means something for us to get good at anything. Playing the piano, throwing a baseball, I believe, takes thousands and thousands of hours, years. I wrote in this book, you might be a great second-year teacher, but you're not a great teacher yet. I can personally say it took me 10 years to even find my voice of what I was trying to tell the children, and then another 10 years to perfect that voice to where the kids were really connecting with what I had to tell them. But why is everybody in such a hurry? That's what troubles me. So yes, it takes a long time.
Since it's the beginning of the school year, I'd like to talk a little bit about how you start the year in your classroom. There's a whole chapter of the book that's devoted to the first day. It's called First Things First. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you use the first day to kind of set up the themes that you're going to be teaching the rest of the year.
Absolutely. One thing that I try and do, people who visit my class well into the year, and they see all these children who are amazingly well behaved and reading well and playing music well, and they're having a lot of fun. And they always ask me the same question. Rafe, I wish I could see you on day one. The thing is, nothing magical happens in my class on day one. Nothing. I always remind teachers, in my classroom, day one looks like day 31. It looks like day 71. John Wooden, the great coach of UCLA, did something that really inspired me. His first day of practice, they ran exactly the same drills that they ran the night before they played in a championship game. It was the same every day. So one thing you should know about my day one, we set the table of stability. I dress exactly the same way every day. I always wear a vest and tie and white tennis shoes. Not because that's my favorite thing to wear. I want the kids to always know exactly what they're going to get when they walk into that room. Their lives are often so unstable. I might be the most stable force in their life. I want them to know that they're safe. They know exactly what they're getting. It's kind of like Cheers. Everybody knows your name, that sort of thing. On day one, I establish in my kids' ears, not in their minds, and certainly not in their hearts, that I have a personal decalogue. I have 10 things that I want to teach my students during the year. And they hear about them for about 5 minutes. What it means to be in room 56. And my 10 don't have to be your 10. But as an example, Hobart Shakespeareans are humble. We don't show off. When we win awards, they either are thrown in the trash can or they're collecting dust in the closet. We don't beat our chests. We're really good at what we do, and we're real quiet about it. I know that may not be the current trend in our culture, but it's the culture of Room 56. These kids who can wow the Royal Shakespeare Company, 5 minutes later are scrubbing the floor, taking out the trash, getting ready for the next show. There's just no, ain't we wonderful?
When I visited your classroom, I was surprised to learn that there's no party or celebration afterward. You kind of just go right into the next practice.
We actually spend collectively, this is not an exaggeration, the kids spend 50,000 hours preparing for the Shakespeare production. It takes a year to put together. It's unbelievable how much they work on it. And on that, they do about 12 shows. people, I mean, this year Sir Ken Robinson was there, Hal Holbrook is there. Next weekend, the kids are going to be spending up in San Francisco with Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen. Everybody loves these kids. But when the show is over, there's no cast party. I teach the children doing the play is the party. And the day after it's all over, we start the next show. As a matter of fact, we have a tradition where on the final bow, we have shields in our classroom which show what year we did what play. On the final bow, the youngest kids hold up next year's shield, and we're already working on it. As a matter of fact, not only do we know what show we're doing next year in 2014 at Cymbeline, I already know what show we're doing in 2015, 16, 17, and 18. It's all scripted out. And the fact that the kids know that keep them hungry to keep working. So always looking to the future. That's the humility. Another part of my personal decalogue, Hobart Shakespeareans are organized. I teach the kids if you're an organized person, your life is going to be better. And the thing about the decalogue, yes, I teach elementary school students all their subjects. Mathematics, science, history, literature, everything, music, art. But really, it's one lesson all day long. Those 10 skills are in every lesson I teach. So in terms of organization, when we play baseball, you have to know your batting order. You have to know what defensive positions you are. You have to know where we store our gloves and bats and balls at the end of the game so the children know where they are tomorrow so we can play again. But when we shift to mathematics, we're organized. We know where our rulers are, where our calculators are. Our numbers are lined up evenly on the page. Because if you're organized, your mathematics will be better, and so will your life. When we go to literature and we're writing things, our paragraphs are organized, our papers are organized. It's one lesson all day long. So that first day, I tell the kids, this is what I'm going to try and show you. They don't understand it yet. They nod their heads. They're 10 years old. They're clueless. But slowly, and sometimes painfully, they start to buy in. But there isn't a Hollywood moment where on day 23, the kid goes, aha, I get it. That's okay. It's the journey that matters, not the destination. But what's great is if you have a personal decalogue, the kids understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. Most classrooms are worried about what we're doing. Everything in my classroom is about why we're doing it. Why we're doing it, to improve the quality of your life. One more thing in the personal decalogue. Hobart Shakespeareans are very aware of time and space. If they were at a gathering like this tonight, they would be silent. No one has to tell them, hey, you're at the Crawford Family Forum, be quiet. No one has to tell them that. You don't need a sign on the wall that shushes you. They look around, they see the situation. If they're on the playground, my classroom are maniacs, and they should be. It's a playground. They love to have water balloon fights and scream and go crazy. Not in a library, not in a classroom, not during rehearsal. We are constantly talking about time and space. And that's why my students are so well behaved, because they're aware of their surroundings. This is the kind of thing that goes on for the first day of school and then every day afterwards.
And on the first day, I was interested to learn that you don't spend a lot of time talking. You write in the book that you spend, 7 to 10 minutes in the morning explaining all of this and laying it out for kids, which is also kind of unlike what we would think of in a Hollywood movie, I think. The teachers do spend a lot of time talking.
Sure. Actually, I got a great lesson from one of my students. There was a student of mine, a wonderful student, who absolutely despised her fourth grade teacher. And when she got to my room, she said, thank God I'm here. And I said, really? Because this fourth grade teacher really had a pretty good reputation, high test scores and everything, but she did talk at her class a lot. And this kid had a great line. Her name was Brendan. She said, Rafe, you gotta understand. I mean, how long can I look at the board? That was her line. After a while, looking at the board is boring. So on the first day, I make this really important thing happen in my classroom. Many teachers, understandably, have to tell their students, listen, we're going to have this great science project, but the materials aren't here yet. The books are arriving next week. Or we've got this art thing, but the supplies didn't come yet. We burn in my classroom the word go. I don't care what rooms I have to break into. I don't care who I have to beg for supplies. We are ready to rock and roll 5 minutes after that opening bell. We always make rugs in my classroom, these beautiful rugs. And on day one, when the kids walk in, there are beautiful rugs hanging in the room. And the kids ooh and ah, and I say, would you like to make one? And they go, yeah. And I say, great, because we're starting in about 3 hours. Today? Yes, today. Well, what else? No, we got work to do. Take out your books. Here's your first assignment. This is a working classroom. All these lessons in this character building, we don't say, hey, 8:30, time for your character lesson. It's just a conversation that we have during the year when we're having lunch together or walking in from the playground or when we're reading literature. Just these little moments where you introduce these themes and let the kids just think about it for a while instead of giving them a standardized test to see if they understand what character is.
And I would like to talk a little bit about testing. In terms of, you of course have been an outspoken critic of increased testing in the classroom. Can you talk about how testing has changed during your career and how that's changed your teaching style?
Well, it hasn't changed my teaching style, but testing certainly has changed over my career. Mary, I don't know any teacher on the planet who doesn't want to assess their students. Of course we assess our students. I'm teaching my students to multiply this week. Next week, I'm going to give them a multiplication test. And they understand why I'm doing it. I want to see if they understand the concept. But I also tell them what's going to happen if they don't do well. I tell them the sun is still going to come up tomorrow. They're not going to burn in hell. Their mother still loves them. I still love them. If you don't do well, it just means I have to show you again. That's all it means. It is not the be-all and end-all of your existence. I tell them my wife did not check my test scores before she fell in love with me. The Crawford Family Forum did not check my test scores before they invited me to this wonderful evening. I think teachers have to be a buffer, explaining to the students, we're going to prepare you for all these tests. We want you to do well. But never, ever think that the regurgitation of facts indicates real scholarship and learning. It doesn't. I tell the kids that I'm sure Bernie Madoff and the Enron boys did very well on their tests. Surely we can't think of them as successful and honorable human beings. I teach the children that the most important things I can teach children are not on the test. So my walking the middle ground, we prepare for the tests, we do well. But I also make sure the kids understand it is a beginning, it is a snapshot, it is not a picture of their whole existence. If I can share with you a story that's not in the book, because it happened just 2 weeks ago. The kids and I were in Hannibal, Missouri, and the wonderful man Hal Holbrook, because he knows that my class reads Mark Twain, set up this amazing time in Hannibal. And one of the things the kids got to do, if anybody remembers Tom Sawyer, there is a great scene in Tom Sawyer when Huck and Tom witness a murder in a graveyard at midnight. I see the heads going up and down. When Engine Joe kills Doc Robinson. We got to go to that cemetery at midnight and read the chapter. It was fantastic. But as we walked out, it was a hot St. Louis night, it was really buggy. And the kids said, oh my God, we're going to get eaten alive. I mean, this is going to be great, Rafe, but we're going to get chewed up. And one of the little girls said, you know, Rafe, last summer when you took us to Yosemite, you bought us insect repellent, and I brought mine for the class so I can spray everybody and then we can go out to the cemetery. I didn't tell them to bring anything. How do you measure that on a test? But I would suggest that that is a young lady who's going to do very, very well. She thought about where she was going. She kept supplies that I had given her a year ago and still knew to bring them on a trip. That's not on the test at the end of the year, but she just passed my test. And that's what I want to get across to teachers.
That's great. And you do have, your students have done very well on standardized tests.
They do very well.
And can you talk a little bit about your method? So basically, you spend about 20 minutes several times a week. Is that how it works?
We spend almost every day preparing for the standardized test, but there's one important thing that we do. We have a period after lunch where we practice for those tests. A lot of teachers, and I understand this, if they have a reading hour, they practice for those tests during the reading hour. I don't do that. I don't want my students to think that taking a reading test is reading. Reading is the most wonderful thing in the world you can do. Reading should be joyous. It should be full of laughter and arguing and sometimes tears and oohs and ahs. Reading is something educated people do every day of their life to connect themselves with the world. That's why in my classroom, I took all the books that have been banned and we read them. Because they're the best books. So that's why, thank you. That's why my fifth graders read of Mice and Men and Malcolm X and, let's see, Catcher in the Rye and Anne Frank and all the other books that are supposed to be bad for them. And they love reading them with me. The reading that we do afterwards, it's to take a test because we are trying to do well in a broken system and we want to keep the powers that be happy. And we separate the two. The same thing with math training. Getting ready for a math test is not the same as learning mathematics. We literally separate them because I want the kids to separate the two in their mind.
You suggest that teachers spend time listening to their students' concerns about testing. I was curious if you'd share a few stories, what you hear from students when you ask them their fears about taking tests.
Oh my gosh. Well, what I always tell teachers is if you think we're frustrated, can you imagine what a child is feeling? I mean, for example, if you're an elementary school kid, you're taking regular tests every week with your teacher. Every 4 to 6 weeks, you're taking these long assessments that sometimes take a week or 3 or 4 days. I see the heads going up and down. And this happens every 3 or 4 weeks. And of course, when those tests keep getting thrown at the kids, we're not teaching them anything. We're losing math lessons, we're losing writing lessons, we're losing grammar lessons because the tests have to be turned in and the kids don't get feedback on their tests. Oh, they see their score, but they really get to really look at their stuff, what they did wrong, how they can get better. It doesn't really help them. So then you get the end of the year, where it's usually something like 6 days of long testing, hour after hour after hour. And often the kids don't get the results of that for a couple of months. How often can a 10-year-old get up for the big game? I don't care how passionate a teacher you are. The kids tell me the thing that is frustrating for them is some of the teachers, I don't mean to bash teachers, but some teachers who are under so much pressure that they start getting cranky and telling the kids, you've got to do well. Don't make me look bad. And then the classroom test becomes about the teacher's reputation instead of the child's education. And even teachers they like, they have told me, they start yelling at them and getting really tense because nobody likes doing it this way. Also, you know, I'm sure your audience knows, standardized tests are not standardized. They are not proctored. They are given by the same people being evaluated in their own classrooms, and that's why we have cheating scandals all over the country. So what I would like to say to everybody listening, if you believe in standardized testing, fine. Can we at least get them standardized so that the data that we're looking at is accurate? Now, I just got my data from last year of the new class. I started last week. All of the students I saw are considered either basic, proficient, or advanced in math. According to the test scores, nobody is behind. Well, I just 2 days ago gave my class, last week, a little multiplication exam, just basic times tables. 1/3 of my class does not know their times tables, and they're in the 5th grade. But their test scores show them to be proficient or advanced in math. Clearly, the data that I've given is not accurate. So even if you believe in this stuff, it doesn't really help you. That's why real teachers know when they assess their students on a weekly basis with assessments they give, it's a much more accurate picture of how your students are doing.
Let's talk a little bit about children's home lives and the role that poverty plays. You write in the book that the teacher is not the most important factor to a child's success in school. Can you talk a little bit about that and how your thoughts?
It is the only time I ever raise my hand at a staff meeting. I am a very quiet man on campus. I rarely say anything. But at least once a year, somebody will come in and sagely say, you know, the teacher is the most important factor in a child's education. No, they're not. Their family is. And then they try to qualify it and they say something like, well, at least on campus, the teacher is the... No, he's not. Because the child brings every value from his family into that room every day. A couple of years ago at Hobart, this really happened. We had a father break into the computer lab